We've worked hard and made history many times. We've gotten this far because together we are tireless. That doesn't mean we don't get tired. It means we help each other continue on. And knowing one voice is strong, but the power of thousands or millions is stronger. We are the tireless, and together we will achieve gender equality.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our exciting launch of Act Together, a very special campaign that we are doing in partnership with the Body Shop Canada for us to come together and act together to strive for gender justice and challenge gender-based violence. My name is Andrea Gunraj, and I work with the Canadian Women's Foundation. We are Canada's public foundation for gender equality. We support diverse women and girls and everyone affected by gender inequality to move out of violence, out of poverty, and into confidence and leadership. I'd like to acknowledge that the work we do and we support, the programs that we support, takes place on First Nations, Métis, and Inuit land. We are very grateful for the opportunity to meet and work on this land, and we're committed to truth, reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in an ongoing effort to make right with all our relations. So we are here today just celebrating and acknowledging the launch of the 16 Days of Activism against gender violence. And you'll hear more about that. It's an international day or international 16 days. And there's really two key things that are happening in this exciting campaign with the Body Shop Canada that I'd like to share with you. First of all, the Body Shop Canada has committed $1 from each holiday gift purchase to support anti-violence programs across the country, up to $50,000. And I'm really excited to let you know that that milestone has already been hit. Thank you, everybody, for your support. Thank you to the Body Shop for supporting out-of-violence programs. And thank you, folks, for buying and giving your support in the holiday gift purchases. This is really fantastic, and it will go to all kinds of programs doing intervention and prevention on gender-based violence in every province and territory of Canada. It means so much, and it will change this horrible situation that we're in right now, where we see an elevated risk of gender-based violence, and we'll hear more about that in a little bit. As part of the 16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence, which I said starts today, November the 25th, we're asking everybody to take 16 digital actions. And you can do that with a special calendar that we are making available to you. And really, you have to go to our website, CanadianWomen.org, or the Body Shop Canada's website, thebodyshop.ca. And I have a little screen to show you about some of the things that we'd like to highlight people can do. You can set up your own digital event. We're asking people to sign a letter to promote a national action plan on gender-based violence, really important for us to do. We're also asking people to share the signal for help, and we'll talk a little bit about that and show you a video about that in a bit. We're also asking for folks to join us on December the 2nd for Tireless Readers Collective discussion. So the Canadian Women's Foundation, we have a Readers Collective that we launched this fall, and we're doing a discussion on great reads, important reads to help us understand gender-based violence. We're also asking people to use the critical thinking cards. This is something that the Body Shop has released to help people get talking about the issues. And really, I think it's an important thing for us to acknowledge and talk about it first before we do anything, and then we'll know how to act on it. I also want to encourage you to, on December 6th, the day that we really acknowledge the Montreal Massacre, to share a video that we are doing just to memorialize and show that we remember, but we also want to act. And then also we have a podcast that we're going to be releasing on December the 8th that you can listen to and share, and just be able to get a chance to get deeper into the issues of gender-based violence. So as I mentioned, you can go to our website, CanadianWomen.org /blog/act-together. And you can also go to the Body Shop's website and get more information about that. So folks, I am just really excited to get the opportunity to speak to two really important people. We have Paulette Senior, the Canadian Women's Foundation President and CEO, and we also have Hilary Lloyd, a representative from the Body Shop. She's the Vice President of Marketing and Responsibility. So I'm going to bring them into the discussion, and we'll get a chance to talk with them about this special campaign and all the things that we're looking forward to. Hello, Hillary and Paulette.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Paulette. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Done.
Fantastic. So, folks, I have some really important questions to ask you. I'm going to start with Hillary. I want to know more about why the 16 days of gender-based violence is so important to the Body Shop this year.
It's a really good question, Andrea. I just want to say thank you so much for having us. The Body Shop Canada is so thrilled to be working in partnership with the Canadian Women's Foundation. We're so excited about the work that we're doing together. So why gender-based violence? Let's start there first. Of course, the Body Shop is a purpose-driven activist brand. We like to think of ourselves that way. And of course, part and parcel to that is that we have a feminist focus. So our aim is very much to seek justice where we believe there is injustice. And certainly sort of that in combination with our focus on feminism, an ambition to end gender-based violence is absolutely a part of that. Yeah, so that answers that particular piece. If we wanted to point to a connection between that and why 16 days in particular, Andrea, you mentioned it. We're in the midst already of our holiday campaign. Of course, we've got an amazing partnership going with the Canadian Women's Foundation. This year's theme, typically on an annual basis, the Body Shop's holiday campaigns have a social justice focus. And our theme this year, as you've said, is around coming together and acting together around ending gender-based violence. Our specific focus on that theme this year is really motivated by the impacts of COVID. Of course, we know that in times of crisis, inequality grows, and we know certainly that the impacts of gender-based violence have intensified as a result of COVID. And so that's that for us has felt very important and has certainly sort of been the foundational influence on our holiday campaign this year.
Hillary, thank you for that background. Really appreciate it. And I just want to take a little bit of a step back and put a question to Paulette. I think sometimes we may use this term gender-based violence over and over again, and we may assume people understand what it means, but not everybody understands what it means, and not everybody knows the dynamics. So I want to ask you, Paulette, what is gender-based violence? Why is addressing it such a priority for the Canadian Women's Foundation? Has been since we started, but especially now in 2020.
Well, thank you, Andrea. And Hillary, thank you so much. I feel as if with all that you said, I'm not quite sure that I need to say more, but I will, because I'm just really inspired by what you shared and what the Body Shop is doing with us this year, but what you've always done on this topic. So it's just incredible. And on this first day of the 16 days, I'm really, really happy to be participating in this event and that we're taking this step together to act together. So gender-based violence refers to the violence that women, two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people are at high risk of experiencing, that they experience, and they are targeted because of who they are, because of their gender. And this includes intimate partner abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, criminal harassment and stalking, emotional abuse, and more. And it can actually happen. It can actually happen anywhere, but it often happens behind closed doors between people who are supposed to know and trust each other. It is also a cycle that is quite common, and it can be deadly. And in Canada, for example, we know that every 6 days on average, a woman is killed by her intimate partner. We also know that sexual violence is the only violent crime in our country that is not on the decline. So that says a lot. And some communities are more at risk of this violence than others, including Indigenous women, women with disabilities, and young women. In particular, they face high risk due to the ways discrimination plays out in our society to target them and make them even more vulnerable. Gender-based violence is not like other types of violence. Running away is very difficult, and there are many barriers of control and shame and judgment that is placed on women, particularly if they lack support, and leaving can actually increase the risk and even lead to death. And why does that happen? Well, we know, for example, that it's grounded in sexism and other forms of discrimination, such as racism, ableism, and homophobia. It happens because women are gender diverse people who, to women and gender diverse people who do not get their full rights and respect and support that they deserve in our society. We also know that it's a socially learned behavior. So we may see it at home, we may learn it there, we may learn it from the media, and that makes love look like control. We learn by noticing who is disrespected in our workplaces and communities and playing it out in their own lives. This violence is rarely reported to authorities like the police and hospitals, partially because people do not feel like they'll get the support they need when they report it. And authorities follow up after violence has already happened. We've seen this in the media over the past several years. So this is why the community-based programs we support at the foundation that provide shelter and counseling and safety planning and prevention and education for teens are so vital. So ending violence is a priority because gender equality will never be achieved if all women and gender diverse people are not safe from violence, harassment, threats due to their gender. And we're seeing a disturbing trend in the pandemic that tells us that the risk of gender-based violence is on the rise. So domestic disturbance, for example, reports have increased in Canada. So have calls to crisis and shelter lines that we know about. And 1 in 10 women report being concerned about violence at home. So this violence was, as we know, occurring and was an emergency before the pandemic hit. So we have to act now to turn this tide.
Thank you so much for that overview, Paulette. That was a lot of detail and information and good data for us to keep in mind.
It was a big question, so I gave a big
huge question. And I would like to also note for folks, if you may not have seen it, Women's Shelters Canada, an umbrella body for women's shelters in Canada, just today released a report, we saw it in the news, that this violence has been increased in terms of shelter calls, that a lot of shelters have reported an increase in calls and an increase in the seriousness of violence. I think it's a good indication, a red flag for us that this violence is indeed increasing behind closed doors, perhaps. And it's something that we need to act on now that really the pandemic has worsened. So thank you for that, Paulette. And I'm going to go to Hillary again. There's some really great activities in the 16 days that we're asking people to do. I want to know about the top activities that you're looking forward to and why.
It's a really good question. I think we can't underscore how important it is that we take a look at these activities based on everything that Paulette just shared with us. So I think that there are actions big and small. My favorites are sort of the ones that stand out for me. There are ones that are as simple as identifying and finding a buddy, an activist buddy, who perhaps you can hold one another sort of accountable or able to continue to sort of champion the 16 days and perhaps sort of march through the programs together. I think that that's a really, really, really smart one, frankly, because it's always nice as a collective to undertake these things together, to sort of be amplifiers together. I think the other one, and Andrea, you touched on it at the outset, is really a part of taking action to sort of find space and create openness for discussion. And create discourse among groups of people. I think it's really important. You specifically mentioned the critical thinking cards. So again, on that calendar, sort of that digital engagement, we've got critical thinking cards that are downloadable, and they are useful tools for sort of diving in and supporting what is very often, or what can be very often, challenging and inspiring conversation. So they're available there as tools. I have to also say, of course, that today is a great day. This live stream is a great kickoff to the initiative. And then the only last thing that I will say is that we cannot underestimate that no action is too small. Again, just to come back to what Paulette was saying, of course, it feels yeah, it feels like there's even pressure, that we need to act now. We need to, of course, come together and act now. And I think as a collective, we can't underestimate the significance of individual action when they are combined. So really important, I think, on that lens, to think that no action is too small. And I think that there are some great choices in terms of actions that people can take on that calendar.
Hillary, thank you for that reminder of no action being too small. So often, especially in this pandemic context, I have to say I've been struggling with this feeling of just not doing enough, and feeling that my life is so small and these problems are so big. And I've really felt overwhelmed, in all honesty. But I think this is such an important reminder for us that we do have a sphere of influence. It may be just 2 or 3 people, but change starts with 2 or 3 people, and that is okay. Use that as an opportunity to be a supportive person. If somebody reaches out to you and needs help, you can do that. You can be that supportive person. You can also get people talking about this. As Hillary said, it's so wonderful to have some things to discuss. And this is really not known stuff. As I mentioned, people don't know about this violence many times. So even something that you might take for granted, oh, of course people know that sexual assault happens. Of course, people know what sexual harassment looks like. Of course, people know what intimate partner, they may not know. So this is a very good reminder for us. Thank you, Hillary, for that. And Paulette, I want to turn to solutions. I can't talk about this issue without thinking about solutions, because I get overwhelmed, I get depressed. I want to hear what we can do to address these issues when it comes to the impacts on women, on Two-Spirit, trans, and non-binary people. Tell us a bit about what the foundation is doing to turn the tide here, and what can everyday people do to challenge this violence in our own communities, no matter where we live.
I think you're right, Andrea. We have to talk about solutions, and that is why the foundation exists. It's about really working to address those solutions, not just point them out, which we know they exist, but actually figure out what is the action that we need to take. So the foundation has an Out of Violence Fund, for example. It is a key pillar of the work that we do. And we support programs that prevent and intervene in situations of gender-based violence. These programs provide services such as shelter to help rebuild life after abuse. Sexual assault crisis support is also a critical part of that, and healthy relationship education, which is a prevention element of it. Together, they take the complex steps necessary to break the cycle of this violence in our communities and in families. And we support programs that, in particular, help young people of all genders learn about dating violence, sexual assault, and how to build safe and healthy relationships. So, for example, having young people be able to identify what is a healthy relationship, what are those indicators, but also what is an unhealthy relationship and what does that look like. So really to be able to break that down. And then we help survivors find safe housing, sexual violence support, counseling, and legal support to help build, to help, in particular, children who witness violence, because we know there's an impact there as well. Right now, the Out of Violence Support Fund, a number of programs in every province and territory in our country. And we learn more, you can learn more about that by going to our website at canadianwomen.org.
Thank you so much for that. I think that the healthy relationships work is really of great interest to me. And I'm going to ask you some questions about that in a bit, Paulette. I just love talking about prevention, and especially when it comes to young people, it's particularly exciting to me. Before we get to the Q&A, and I would really like to ask you folks, if you would like to ask any questions of Hillary or Paulette, please drop them in the chat. Before we get into the Q&A section, I do want to speak to the actions again. Just want to remind you, I'm going to keep coming back to these. I think it's so just fantastic that we have 16 days to do something, and some of the actions are easier than others. I didn't put them all up there on screen, but some of them are things like sharing a post, resharing a video. So it's simple stuff that you can do through your own social media channels, but there's other things that you can do as well too that are a little bit more robust. So we're asking people to set up your own digital event that you can get people talking about these issues in your life. This could be your coworkers, this could be your friends and family. I'm going to be doing something, I think, in a couple of weeks that really looks at some media about gender-based violence. I want to do a little bit of a movie screening and ask people to join, and we're going to discuss. So that's a simple example of something that you can do. And you can invite family and friends to attend and make it really accessible through Zoom. So a lot of people are using Zoom for these things if you have internet access and if you have the ability to access a laptop. I also want to suggest to you this letter on the National Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence. A National Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence is something that Women's Shelters Canada has really been leading the way in. Again, one of our wonderful partners who do a lot of this work. And I think that it's so important for us to think about that kind of national high-level solution that looks at policy and practice, as well as things like support services, prevention, stopping violence before it starts, and intervention, dealing with violence after it's already happened. It's a very holistic idea. And we're not the only jurisdiction that thinks about this kind of stuff. There's other jurisdictions in the world that have things like action plans that are on a national level. There's no reason why Canada should not. And in fact, we need it. As you know, on average, a woman is killed by her intimate partner every 6 days in Canada. That is an emergency level. We need to have a high level action plan to do something about it. So this letter is just for people to sign up. You can just do it really quickly online, get it to your MP and your MPP. And basically it tells them, hey, I care about this. I want to do something here. I'm asking you as our leaders to please do something. And will you tell us what you're going to do on gender-based violence? And, you know, these folks who are our leaders, they need to know that we care and they need to be accountable to us so that we change the way things work so this violence is not as common. Oftentimes it's seen as something that just between him and her, just between two people. It's actually not. It's so common that there are big things that need to happen to make it less common, to change our culture, our practices, our approaches to these things, to get us so that we are acting on a healthy relationship lens, as opposed to this idea that love is control. This is too often the way that we've seen this, and we need to challenge it. This is one really robust way to do it. I also want to share as well that we have this Tireless Readers Collective. This is a really fun thing that we do. We get to speak to authors who are doing incredible things, using literature, using, CamLit, that could be memoirs, that could be thrillers, that could be novels, speaking to these issues. It can also be just nonfiction books that talk about the issues. And we're going to be speaking with Julie Lalonde on December the 2nd. She wrote a really powerful memoir of experiencing partner violence and also experiencing stalking after she left a violent relationship for years. And she has a great perspective on this, a very important perspective. And we want to talk to her not only about her book, but also about what she would say we need to be reading now to educate ourselves and understand all these very confusing, sometimes, warning signs of violence. I want to also mention to you, December 6th, we're going to put out a memorial video. We're going to ask people to share that so that we acknowledge this day, but then also acknowledge the things that we need to do right now to end this violence, because it continues on. It happened in 1989, and even to this day, we're seeing this violence. Again, a woman is killed every 6 days on average by her intimate partner in Canada. And then on December the 8th, we're also releasing our new podcast, and it's going to be on gender-based violence. You'll hear some familiar voices on that as well, too, getting deeper into the issue and making sure that we are speaking to it in a way that is not just surface, but really understanding what needs to happen, what it looks like, and what we can all do. So many thanks to Hillary and Paulette for being here, and we're going to get into some questions now. I want to throw a question to Paulette. I mentioned to you that I really do love just healthy relationship interventions. I love the programs that we support here. I love the stuff that we do with all genders on violence prevention. And we look at healthy relationships. I want to get a sense from you. What are some of the key signs of a healthy relationship that we would be supporting programs to teach young people? What are the key ingredients of a healthy relationship?
Well, I think there are a number of signs that we can take from that. And when I think of when I was young, I wish I knew some of this information, for example, so it would have been really helpful. It's about respect. One of the respectful communication is one of the important things I think that's important. It's about really being able to listen to someone else, to make sure that you're not being downgraded by someone else, that you're not being verbally abused, that someone is not seeing you as less than a human being, but that you're actually being appreciated and loved. And love, again, that word control keeps coming up. Love is not about control. It's actually about freedom, you know? And so I think it's about switching that around in the minds of our young people in particular, so that they understand what that looks like, what it feels like. It's a good thing. It's about being patient and being kind with each other. It's about understanding. All of that matters when it comes to a loving, caring relationship. And it's not just about intimate relationships, Andrea. It's all relationships. So it's about relationship within your family. It's about relationship within your friendships and your circles. But it's also about intimate relationships, right? That it's about respecting someone. It's about appreciating who you are. It's about your dignity and your humanity, and that it's not about control. It really is about the freedom to really be who you are.
Thanks for that. Paulette, I think that point about it not only being in intimate partner relationships is really important. Sometimes I think we really focus on intimate partner violence, and that's an important thing to focus on, don't get me wrong. But gender-based violence can happen between people who work together. It can happen in people in families, like it's happened between siblings, parents, children. It's a very diverse form of violence, I would say. And so recognizing the warning signs, they'll look different in different contexts. Mm-hmm. So we have to be able to meet those needs and be able to speak to it. And that's what I like about our Healthy Relationships programs. They're not one-offs where you just spend an hour with a young person and be like, this is the warning signs of violence and this. No, they're long-term programs that people get the opportunity to speak about these things on an ongoing basis, mm-hmm. to do peer-to-peer work as well too. Again, a teacher telling a young person what this is may not land the way peers would. Yeah. So I think that's,
you know, Andrea, I was also thinking it's also about when you have an interaction that it leaves you feeling good about yourself, even if it's a critical interaction where honesty is shared, that it's not about tearing you down, it's about building you up. And that's an important thing, because sometimes you may end up in a situation where you can never satisfy the other person because you're always trying to satisfy them, to make them happy. And truly, you're the one who's making yourself happy, right? The happiness comes from within you, and then you appreciate and love the interaction with others. So it's really about really coming out of a situation, having interactions that are, that are affirming and not ruining your self-esteem or damaging your self-esteem. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And we're going to just shift gears now. I have a question from Suzanne. Hillary, this is for you. Tell us about how local body shop stores are involved with this initiative. What are people doing?
Great question, Suzanne. Paulette, I do have to say, I mean, what a powerful statement. I'm just sort of sitting here reflecting on the idea that love is not control, love is freedom. I think that, I mean, that's a very powerful thought and really important. So I just wanted to take a minute to reflect that back. It's powerful. Back to the body shop. In terms of how local body shop stores are involved in this initiative, we're so fortunate at the body shop and across our body shop business that we have local activists in our stores, which we like to think of as activist hubs across the country. And so up until this point, one of the ways in which sort of both our stores and our customers could be involved in this particular campaign was through our holiday gift contributions. So transactions against gifts in our stores resulted in a contribution to the Out of Violence Fund that Paulette was talking about. Now we've reached our $50,000 mark. So we're sort of transitioning the program, and certainly in our stores, our store teams are more than equipped and able as amplifiers, and like I said, as advocates and activists to talk about this campaign and to direct anyone who is interested into the resources that we've made available on our website, sort of thebodyshop.com, around Come Together, Act Together, and the campaign. And likewise, there are links in that environment, which of course will redirect to the Canadian Women's Foundation. And on an ongoing basis, of course, our store teams will always be entrepreneurial in developing programs which support sort of gender justice and out of violence programs. So sort of be on the lookout, and we as a business will communicate that out to our customers through our social media channels, through email, through the stores themselves, et cetera. So really great question. Our ambition, of course, is to continue to use our stores and of course, the amazing collective of consultants we have in our stores as resources and advocates for these kinds of programs.
Thanks, Hillary. It's so fun to hear all the things that your Body Shop team has done in the past. It's really amazing. And you've got very active folks on your team. So thanks to you folks for making it happen. Oh my goodness. Even before the 25th, we had hit our goal, and it blew my mind how that happens in a pandemic when things are so different that people are still like coming together and showing up. This is really, really cool. I have another question here. Paulette, I think this is for us to give some information about. Jen is asking about increased gender-based violence in the pandemic. First of all, the evidence that it's increased, and how can we deal with this in the second wave? Like we're now perhaps seeing another spike. I can tell you folks, in terms of the evidence, we've seen that the risk has increased because we're getting every indication that there's been increased calls to police, who are one marker of violence, and also to shelter and support services. They've seen a bump in calls, but they've also seen a weird decrease in calls. Paulette, I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the places that said, we have this weird, eerie quiet going on right now. Why do you think that's happening at the same time that there's been a bump in calls too?
Yeah, it is weird, isn't it? Because the story can be that, just one way where there's an increase. But, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic when the message was stay home, stay home, stay home. And for those of us who are working in the sector, we know that staying home wasn't always the best thing. And sometimes you were safer leaving that home that was dangerous for you and heading to a shelter, or making a call in order to get the support that you need. I think I know there's one area in the GTA where the police were saying that they're having an eerie drop in calls, in crisis calls for help, and so they were worried about what that meant. And in cases like this, in normal thinking, you'd think that would be a good thing that the calls have dropped. But knowing that the calls have been a particular way, and in the middle of the pandemic, when you see increase in other areas, but you're seeing a decrease, you're thinking something is off here. So in their wisdom, they knew that it could be because in the isolation, women are not able to pick up the phone to make that call, right? And so the control that may have been happening in the home and the abuse that may have been happening would have been preventing women, because if everyone's staying home, that means abusers are also staying home. And if abusers are staying home, then women don't have the freedom, one, to escape the home, to go for a walk, to even make a phone call. So that's part of what we were seeing as well. So it was this kind of like weird phenomenon, if you will, that was happening, that you really have to dig down to find out what was happening.
Thank you for that, Paulette. It does indicate to us that sometimes you have to look beyond the data itself, the surface data, and be able to interpret what is actually happening. And really, the way that gender-based violence has even been seen as an issue, there were years when people didn't recognize this violence. It's actually a relatively recent understanding of it now. It's always been around, but I think it's something that we're developing now in understanding of because of the voices of survivors, listening to their voices and seeing what they say happens to them, and also the voices of advocates, people who have been seeing patterns. So it's really important for us to listen to what advocates say. And I think that's one of the things. It's like when you see what's happening with the crisis calls lines and with the shelter lines, that tells you a lot of what's actually happening in communities. But then you also have to take that extra step and say, if there was all these calls and then suddenly a drop, what's going on for people and that unsafety that happens? So I want to just recognize the Signal for Help campaign that we were working on. And the Signal for Help is part of the 16 days, making sure that we promote that every chance that we get. The idea that when we're on video calls, if we need to say that we want somebody to check in safely with us, we can do this signal, just one quick move in a camera. It doesn't leave a digital trace. Yeah, thank you. It doesn't leave a digital trace, and it shows that, hey, check in with me. I need some support. And what we're asking people to do in the Signal for Help, if you see that signal in a video call, what you want to do is try to reach out to somebody when it's safe to do so. So you don't necessarily say it right in the call, but you might WhatsApp them afterwards. You might text them after. You might email after. You might say, hey, just want to let you know I'm here for you. Reach out to me when you need me. And so that person can reach out to you when they feel safe and let you know what they need you to do. They might just very well want you to listen to them. They might very well say, I don't know where I can go for support with this, or what is this? You be that supportive person. You don't take over for them. You don't call 911. You don't do anything without their lead. But what you're saying is, I'm going to support you. I'm going to help you find help. And if you reach out and you get to a dead end, you come right back to me and we will continue just working together. It is a way to show that you are a supportive person at a difficult time for people. So again, the Signal for Help is just a one quick move that you can make in a camera, and hopefully you'll be able to do that. But there are other things that you can do as well. If you need support, there's other crisis lines, there's other programs that you can reach out to. This is one tool that may help some people some of the time. And we just want to make sure that you understand what to do when you see it. So really the last thing I want to ask folks, Hillary, I'm going to start with you. What are you going to do? What are you looking for? I know you're going to do all the 16 actions for sure, but I want to know which one are you really looking forward to do, and just give us a sense of what you're doing so people can get an understanding.
I think I'm going to host conversations for sure. So that is the one thing that I am committed to doing, which is sort of to gather my peer group and frankly my family group and create an environment for us to take some challenging and some hard conversations. I think that advocacy and awareness is so important. We're talking about, of course, this second wave, and I think more advocacy and more awareness in terms of its immediate impact on people is essential. And so I think that the primary action that I can take is to bring awareness to sort of my social circle and my peer group so that it can be top of mind. And then what we can also do then is talk about sort of outlets and resources for support, of which exist, of course, within the 16 days of activism. But for me, it's really all about advocacy and awareness and taking action to have conversations right away.
Hillary, you mentioned to me this before, the idea that you talk with people who maybe have the same view as you or similar views, but it's really important to talk to people who might have a different view.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, I think that there are resources available and educational tools available. I think the Canadian Women's Foundation provides a lot of those resources and tools to, again, use in the spirit of taking those kinds of challenging conversations. So for me, I think as much as it's important to find like-minded individuals and groups, again, for the purposes of awareness and advocacy, it's just as important to bring that discourse and those conversations to perhaps people who just frankly, and you mentioned it, Andrea, sort of just don't have it necessarily in their current consciousness, or who may challenge that. And then again, I would lean on a lot of those shareable resources and tools to facilitate dialogue and create those conversations for sure. Super, super, super important. More is more in that context.
More is more. I like that.
More.
Paulette, what about you?
Can I just say how great it is to hear a corporate partner that we have, the Body Shop Canada, can actually demonstrate just how important it is to be a good corporate citizen, to be a great corporate citizen. You know, I'm just really inspired by that. And sometimes when we think of corporations just as individuals, we don't really look at the people who work within them. So Hillary, I am just really inspired by you. And I just want to thank you personally for doing this today, and all your colleagues across the country that's taking this on like it matters, because you're a part of our communities and it's so important. So I just wanted to say that. And then in terms of what I'm doing is that I'm going to be sharing with my friends and families everything that the 16 Days of Activism is about. I think it's important that our friends and families know. I have, as you can imagine, a wide circle of friends and multiple circles of friends, and I have multiple circles of families that I can actually share this with. So I'm going to deliberately be sharing all of this, but I'll also share with them what are the actions that they can take during the 16 days, so that they can have it to be a part of their lives as well, and they can themselves act together on what they can do during the 16 days.
Awesome. I see that as a little bit of inception. We're planting the seeds for people so that they can use this as a jumping point. This was just the first part, but there's going to be more as time goes on. The 16 days passes, but this issue continues. So I just want to thank you both. Hillary, Paulette, thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving your ideas. Thanks for these spontaneous questions. You know, I love spontaneous questions. And good luck to all of us in this campaign. I just really appreciate you too. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So folks, I think this is just an exciting thing for us to pay attention to be a part of. To get more information at the Canadian Women website, canadianwomen.org, canadianwomen.org, I'm not saying it right. Act Together for 16 days. So you just can go to our blog. There's the URL for you. And you can also go to the Body Shop website as well too, thebodyshop.ca, and get a little bit more information about what the 16 days is all about and actually what the actions are for each of the 16 days. And I think it's really important for us. Today is November the 25th. So we're acknowledging that this is the launch of the 16 Days of Activism. This is also the International Day on acknowledging gender-based violence and violence against women. And I think it's important for us to also recognize that today is the anniversary of Anne Southam's passing. This is a woman who was very important to the Canadian Women's Foundation, and we want to honor her. I don't know how much you folks might know about Anne Southam, but Anne Southam was a big supporter of the Canadian Women's Foundation. She was also a trailblazer in her own right. Anne Southam was born in 1937 and passed in 2010, and she was a trailblazing composer in Canada's classical music world. And she was a member of the Order of Canada. She was really passionate about gender equality, but she was also this passionate musician as well too, who was a composer who did so many trailblazing things in classical music. She bequested the Canadian Women's Foundation a very large donation, and it was the largest single donation a community-based Canadian women's organization has ever received from an individual. And it's really an extraordinary legacy that lives on even today. Its impact is felt in our programs, in our services, in the programs that we support. I'm going to introduce to you one of my colleagues, Laura Owen. Laura, hi.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. Laura, I just wanted to take the opportunity to interview a little bit about who Anne Southam was and the impact of her work. Laura, you may or may not know Laura, but Laura is Senior Director of Philanthropic and Planned Giving at the Canadian Women's Foundation. So first, tell us, Laura, who was Anne Southam, and tell us what she meant to the foundation.
Wonderful. Well, first, let me say thank you so much, Andrea. It's an absolute pleasure to be a part of today for all the reasons, obviously, the start of this big campaign that we're starting today, but also, of course, the anniversary and honoring Anne. So thank you for that. As you had already shared at the start, Anne was many things to many people and all amazing. For what, I will just start off by saying that I did not actually have the pleasure of meeting Anne. I started with the foundation 9 years ago this month. So I did not have that pleasure or honor, but I certainly have heard many, many wonderful things about Anne from my colleagues over the years, as well as from her brother Kip, who I'm proud to say is also a dear member of the Canadian Women's Foundation family. And so just to add to what you've already shared, Andrea, in terms of who Anne was, and of course the impact to the foundation, as you mentioned, trailblazing composer, member of Order of Canada. This, what I'm about to say next, comes directly from her brother Kip, who's told me that he believes Anne was born a feminist. So she was obviously very passionate about making positive change for women and girls in Canada. She was involved with the foundation for a number of years, 12 to be exact. And in her role with the foundation, she's been a donor, she was a volunteer, and she was a very outspoken spokesperson on behalf of strategic philanthropy benefiting women and girls. And this was critical for Anne. She strongly believed in women using the power of their own money through charitable giving to help other women and girls. She would often say that helping women helps us all. So investing in women, and they can go on to help their families, communities, and societies. This obviously came through with Anne personally, as you had mentioned, her bequest, which amounted to $17 million. And this it is the largest gift ever made to a Canadian women's organization from an individual. And it did raise the work of the foundation, not only the work, but also the impact to a whole new level. And one thing I want to share in particular is that Anne actually helped to found the Girls Fund in 2006. So one of the ways her bequest has actually helped benefit girls is by, with her bequest, the Canadian Women's Foundation was able to support 54 girls programs. That translated to helping 2,400 girls throughout Canada to help build their confidence, their resilience, and their leadership skills. And I'd like to think that she would be really, really touched and honored by that, and that would be exactly how she'd like to see her support, where her support be directed. I do know from speaking with Kip that he said that she was very much a big fan of the Canadian Women's Foundation and the work, and that she would be truly honored and touched with what we've been able to do to date with her legacy. One of Anne's favorite sayings, has been said throughout the years, was that when women have power, girls can dream. And Anne believed that there was so much pressure on girls today and that they lose ground as they reach adolescence. So her dream was to get them before that and give them every chance in the world to succeed. So again, touching back on the work that we've been able to do because of Anne's transformational gift and generosity, believe that she would be happy to hear how we've been doing that so far.
Thank you for that background, Laura. I think that Anne would have been somebody that I would have loved to meet, not just because of her generosity and the fact that she's founded the Girls Fund, but also because she was a musical composer, and I love music, and I think that's so awesome. There are not many women who have been able to rise to this, forefront. Those opportunities were not available to women for many, many years. So she is a trailblazer, and I think she's been that in many ways, in many parts of her life.
Exactly. Agreed.
Thank you so much for joining us, Laura, for giving us this background, giving us this little opportunity to honor Anne and all she's done for us.
Thank you.
So, folks, I just want to thank you very much for joining us today. And I just want to give you just a little reminder of what you can do over the 16 days. These are the events that we're highlighting, but there are things you can do between November the 25th all the way up to December the 10th. If you go to the CanadianWomen.org website, you'll be able to find all the details there. Some actions are quicker and easier than others. Some things are perhaps going to need a little bit of planning, but I think that there's something for everybody in there. And even if you can't do all 16, I would like to encourage you to do 3. Pick 3 that you can handle over the 16 days and do them, and know that you'll be a part of a big collection of people who are trying to make a difference right now, trying to bring some visibility to this issue that too often gets left in the shadows, gets unheard. I think about the voices not only who don't get a chance to speak, but also haven't been listened to very well. And for us to just take this opportunity to learn to listen to what survivors are saying and to what advocates are saying, I think will really make a big difference for us all. So many thanks for joining us today. And I just want to give you a reminder as well that we have something really special coming up. We have this event on December the 2nd, Reads to Challenge Gender-Based Violence with Julie Lalonde. Julie Lalonde is a writer in and of herself. She wrote about her experience with intimate partner violence. And she's going to be joining us to speak about not only her book and her work, but the kinds of things that we need to be reading now to learn more about these issues. And I also want to flag for you, December the 11th, Jessica J. Lee. We're having a wonderful discussion, meet and greet. And you can find more information about that at canadianwomen.org/tireless readers collective. Her book that she recently released, Two Trees Make a Forest, just recently won a big award for nonfiction. And after reading it, I just am in awe of her ability to paint a picture when it comes to speaking about landscapes and what that means in her life and her family's life. It was really a very special book, and this is going to happen on December the 11th. So just wanted to flag those 2 things for you. There's going to be opportunities for you to meet again with us. And of course, if you do the 16 days, there's going to be lots of ways to engage. You can follow us on social media. You can also check in on our Facebook page so that you can find more events that we're doing over the 16 days. So I'm going to end here, and I'm going to leave you with a video that just explains our Signal for Help campaign and what the Signal for Help actually looks like in practice. And if you would like this video, you can actually go to our YouTube channel and find it and share it with others as well too, so that they will understand what the signal looks like and get access to the URL that explains more about what you can do if you see the signal. Many thanks for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Can you share that banana bread recipe?
Sure. It's actually my mom's banana bread recipe, but it's pretty foolproof and super easy.
Well, I really appreciate it. I know your mom's a great baker, so should be good.